Welcome to the Interfaith Center Summer of 2023 workshop series. My name is Sandy Watson. I am the administrator at the Interfaith Center. And for those that are just coming on, I will be introducing for the next 2 weeks as Sophia, our director, is on a well-deserved break. She's in Turkey, having a wonderful time with her family. Peace, salam, and shalom to you. The Interfaith Center's mission is to reduce the fear and prejudice among the world's religions. We aim to change the attitudes and behaviors of people by educating them about the world religions, promoting interfaith dialogue, and providing relationship building opportunities, which goes right into today's class. It's dreams and relationships. And along with Reverend Susan Sim-Smith, we will also have a contributing teacher, Dr. Chelsea Wakefield. These sessions are recorded, and if you happen to miss any classes, they are on the Interfaith Center YouTube channel. I will put it in the notes. During the teaching time, please keep your mics to mute. We have an opportunity to speak with a Q&A session. And if you have something during the Q&A session, just raise your hand. It's on the chat. We have a comments and burning questions. If that just can't wait, you are welcome to put them into the chat box and we will interact as we can. And without any further ado, I would like to turn this over to Reverend Smith, and I'm going to highlight you.
So I'm happy to be with you all again. As you will remember, we have one more session next week is our session on dreams related to life after death. One of my very favorite things to think about and to learn about. And on the website, on my website, there is also a PDF of a book called Conscious Dying, a booklet that some of you have read and have contributed to. But anyway, it's the story of a very close friend of mine and dreams that she had as she was dying and what she taught me about death. So if you want dreams and dying on steroids, just check that out. So this week and next week, I will stay on an extra 30 minutes so we have time to process and have a little bit more of a free-for-all. And you're welcome to stay on if you want to. You're welcome to leave if you need to do that. So dreams don't keep us from suffering, and they don't keep us from having problems and going through hard things, and they certainly don't stand in the way of blessings and joy, but they do accompany us and give us more consciousness about suffering that is caused by things that maybe we're doing that we don't even know we're doing, or suffering that might be caused by somebody else that's stirring up mischief that we're not even aware of. So I love the dream process and meditation so deeply that I realize that I give it an entrepreneurial, very hard sell. And I want you to take my entrepreneurial, very hard sell with a little bit of a grain of salt, because there's still going to be challenges. Today, we're going to talk about dreams and relationships. So this might be dreams in a relationship with a spouse, a partner, a very close friend, a colleague, even an animal. And what I want to say about relationships is I think it's really difficult to evolve spiritually and psychologically and just plain old maturationally without being in at least and preferably more than one really committed relationship. Because it's only there that we can access the deepest levels of the soul and our own shadow and our own brokenness. And a few weeks ago, we read a quote from Richard Rohr that says, "It's only our persona and our shadow that allow us to do evil to others of which we have no awareness." And we're good people and we don't want to be doing that stuff. And so relationships allow you to find positive resources in you that you did not even know that you have. And they allow you to know your shadow of both treasures that are there and destructive things that are there. So it's really, really important to stick with at least one or two long-term committed relationships so that your journey can just get deeper and richer. So I'm going to read a little quote. I love this book, Embracing Each Other. And at the back of the little section about relationships, Hal and Sidra Stone write, when we do not have ongoing intimate relationships, it is easier for the primary selves to arrange for a life that will suit them perfectly. It is easier to avoid our own disowned selves. And if everything is arranged well, we might even manage to avoid all direct contact with our own vulnerability. So it is through relationships, in part, that we really have an opportunity to evolve, to grow, to mature, to love, to be loved, to cherish, to be cherished, and to look into places in us that, I mean, none of us are bad people. Nobody in this group is going to wake up and say, I'm going to do something destructive to another human that I love today, right? Nobody's going to do that. That's all unconscious stuff. The sociopaths are not on the call. So they don't need this message, you know. They're running their life by certain programs. So as we've talked about so many times, we have what Richard Rohr calls a program for happiness, what Hal and Sidra Stone call your primary selves. All the different theoretical constructions have a way of saying we have parts of ourselves that are our favorite parts. Our talent often lies there, our comfort, our security, our protection. And we believe that that's who we are. And we get up and we make a list of what we're going to do that day. And we run our lives out of these primary selves. And, you know, little do we know that there's a cost to that. And so what Hal and Sidra's quote is saying is that if we're not in a relationship, all the disowned material, it can't stay down forever, but if you're in committed relationships, it's going to come up faster because the people that love you don't like you messing with them in unconscious ways. And if given half of an opportunity, they're going to mess with you, and you're going to say, there must be a seed of truth in this. And dreams really help that process along. So I want to tell a couple of dreams, and then I want to do a little more reading from Hal and Sidra. And by that time, it'll be time for Chelsea to teach us. So I have permission for my husband to share this dream. So in the last week, my husband had this dream. So he and I share dreams with each other in the morning, most mornings. And it's a wonderful, wonderful part of the relationship. You don't need a partner willing to share a dream with you. So I don't want to put that up as an expectation. I'm just saying that's what happens at my house, and there are other ways. But anyway, he shared this dream with me. And part of our unspoken discipline is that we look to see what of this is inside stuff and what of it might be outside. So here's this dream. The dream is Susan and I, this is Rick's dream, Susan and I are out at a retreat center we're working on a bunch of projects. And I realize I am through with my work. So I get ready to leave, and I look and I realize Susan is not through with her work. And so I am going to leave the car with Susan so that she has, she's not through. She needs the car. I don't need it. And I'm going to hitchhike back home with this woman that I don't know who has on these really bizarre and wildly creative shoes. They're like big art projects, like you've never seen a human walking around in shoes like this, okay? So on an inside dream, what it might be, is I've been working more in the last 3 months than I normally work. So it might be that Rick's inner feminine that has been really busy working on stuff. This is if it's an inside dream, that his busy inner feminine is still busy on some projects, but that his Rick self, it feels complete and is ready to go back home, which on an interior level might be back to his center. And so he doesn't want to deprive his feminine of finishing up her projects. And because he loves her and he's kind and his mama raised him right, he leaves me a car. So he hitchhikes in, and to his great surprise, first that he's hitchhiking, and second, that he gets a ride with this wildly creative feminine with this bizarre standpoint of really unusual shoes. So if it were an inner dream, it might look something like that. If it were an outer dream, he might be feeling that normally it is Rick that is too busy. So I usually have complaining rights. And that, you can get a lot of leverage out of complaining rights. But right now, he has complaining rights because I've had maybe 6 new projects, opportunities to do things that are really, really fun for me. As Rick says, it's a good thing nobody's paying you to do this stuff. Please don't pay her to do it, or she'll just do it more. So I've had my finger in a bunch of pies of creative things that I'm really loving doing. So it could be that Rick is wanting to make a comment to me. Okay, we've been out at this retreat center, and I've been doing stuff and you've been doing stuff. And I'm feeling finished with all this doing stuff. And I, Rick, want to move back toward my center, which would have more quiet, more calm, more free time, more relationship time, more time out in nature. But I see that you're not quite finished. And what I really want to say to you is you can stay out there and finish. I love you and you can keep the car. But I am getting a different pair of shoes. I'm going to go have some fun and get back at my own center, which could open a conversation in the relationship about busyness, about retirement, about activity, about relationship time together, and so forth and so on. So we get, as we've talked about before, we get in bonding patterns in relationships with anybody that we love. So the really kind part of Rick might not want to say to me, just keep doing all that work, but I'm putting on different shoes, girlfriend. He's too kind and he really doesn't like to mess with me. But what does the dream say? The dream might be saying just that. You have my blessing. You just keep it up. I'll leave you some support, but I'm not doing it. Let's talk about that, Susan. So that dream opened up a conversation about that. So that's just one example of dreams and relationships. Look to see if it's parts inside, and look to see if it's opening up a conversation in the relationship. So I'm going to tell you just 1 or 2 more dreams. So as some of you know, my very, very close friend, Marguerite Bergen, was dying, and I was assisting and supporting her in a 27-day dying project. And she wasn't ill from anything, and there wasn't any obvious way for her to exit the planet. So it was complicated. But anyway, she was dying and I was helping her. And I was just so totally devoted to this woman. I slept on a pallet at the foot of her bed for most of 27 nights. She would wake me up in the night and tell me all these unbelievable dreams of what God was teaching her. So it was like being at a triple PhD class on what is it like to get to the other side. It was so much joy. I wouldn't have missed a second of it. At the same time, I disowned how much I was going to miss her when she died. I could not let myself feel it. I couldn't let myself know it. I didn't want to think about it. I loved her so much. I wanted to give her every single thing I could give her, and I didn't want to miss learning anything. So this is my dream. I love this dream. I love the dream makers that can even make dreams like this. So in the dream, I'm coaching Marguerite as she is trying to hit a ball. And she's just trying to hit this ball. She's trying to hit a home run. She's trying to hit it. She's trying to hit it, trying to hit it. And I'm coaching and teaching and I'm cheering for her. And I want her to hit the home run. And I realize in the dream, so I'm not letting myself know this in daily life because it would be too damn uncomfortable, but I'm letting myself know it unconscious. Is saying, you need to wake up. So I realize in the dream that I'm playing on the opposite team. And so I'm cheering for my opponent. And if they hit a home run, I lose. So when I wake up and I work with the dream and I look at the inside pieces, I look at the outside pieces, I got it. It wasn't very hard to get that I'm helping her do something that when it actually happens, I'm going to feel a huge loss. And that loss is getting pushed into the unconscious. And the dream maker is saying, you probably need to keep a little bit of that in your awareness. So that's a big relationship dream. It's nothing but a relationship dream. And it helped me tremendously to have it. So I'll tell you one other relationship dream. We have 2 dogs. One has been here a long time. The other one is newer. And the first dog probably was feeling profoundly left out with the second dog. And I was mitigating against it and I was doing everything I could possibly do, but I actually wasn't doing enough. And so I have a dream where Stoney, who is our Clumber Spaniel, shows up and he's limping. And I began to not only wonder about that, I looked, who is the Stony part of me inside and what might Stony be telling me outside? And I started wondering, how excluded is he feeling? And soon after that, this dog began to cry, which he's never done in 8 years. He would sit in his chair and just go, on and on. So I called a veterinarian buddy of mine who's a homeopathic veterinarian and a psychotherapist. And I said, most of you know her, it's Pat Bradley. I said, Pat, I think he's either feeling left out or he's sick. She said, totally agree. Give him 24 hours of nothing but massive contact and see what happens. So in 24 hours, I just petted him and loved him and kissed him and gave him all this attention and treats, and it stopped. The dog has not cried, whined since then. But he had been isolating. He was not sleeping in the room where Rick and I sleep with the other dog. Now he's sleeping in the room. We're all sleeping in the same room, 4 beating hearts. When I come up to my study where I am now, he was isolating. So the big German Shepherd is at my feet and Fargo has started coming. So I have meetings in this room. I do work stuff in this room, and Stoney's self-esteem has gone up so much that he doesn't want to miss a good meeting. So that was a clue from a dream. So a dream where my husband might need to say to me, I see how busy you've gotten and I'm not going to judge it, but I'm not doing it. And I'm finding new dancing slippers. And you need to know that. We better talk about this. One dream in relationship. The dream in relationship with Marguerite, where I have literally thrown my entire life force into those 27 days to give to her. And I'm not counting the cost. I'm not counting what it cost me. I don't have any time to think about what it's costing me. And then the dream comes in and says, when she hits the home run, she's playing on the other team. Your team's going to lose. So I could begin to deal with the loss of it. And then the dog showing me that he's limping to give consciousness a clue. I mean, I didn't want the dog to feel left out. I was unconscious. It was in my shadow that I was not helping this beloved being. So we get help in our dreams about our relationships. And we need the help so badly because we're good people and we still have shadows. And our shadows carry gifts and talents that we have to bring to the world that we are not developing. And our shadows have stinky, broken, hurting places where we unconsciously and unintentionally, or sometimes semi-consciously and occasionally even intentionally, do things that are not good for other people. And the dreams really help us. The dreams keep a dialogue with us about it. So I'm going to read a little bit more from Helen Sitter's book, and then I'm going to give Chelsea a chance to enrich our lives. So this is called the Dream Weaver in Relationship. When one surrenders to relationship as a journey of two souls, one finds that there is a dream weaver working deep within, sending forth dreams that can be used as guides along the evolutionary path. It is an awesome and yet most supportive idea to realize that there is an intelligence within us that can be available to direct the dream process, and that wants us to be more conscious human beings. When the process of relationship is seen as a vehicle for our individual evolution of consciousness, the dreams give invaluable information, accessing that great data bank of the unconscious. Each night, the dreams reveal the activities of the day, specific pictures of areas where there is a lack of awareness. In relationship, the dreams of one partner can be understood by another, and there is a level at which the dreams bypass the rational mind and speak directly to the unconscious of the other. Rick telling me that dream, I did not even need to say a word. I didn't need to hear him say a word. It bypassed my rational mind and went into my own unconscious as awareness about the relationship. One of the most effective ways of surrendering to relationship is to share dreams in the morning, or if this is with someone with whom you do not live, to get together with that person and share relationships. If we become too tied to our partner, we may dream that we're having an affair, or we may dream that our partner is having an affair. This is the dream weaver's attempt to break up a bond if we're too tied to the partner. The dream has performed the same service that an attraction to another person can provide, but it prevents us with the information more quickly, more immediately, and with fewer interpersonal entanglements. If we become too passive, we might dream of being married to being attracted to somebody that's very assertive. Our missing selves in our relationships often call to us first in dreams. A man dreams that his wife is very busy and no longer really available to him. He didn't even realize himself that this was happening until he had the dream. So that's enough of all that. It's a really fun process. And if you're looking for a new hobby, find someone that you already love and you're already in a relationship with that person, and you and that person begin to meet occasionally to talk about dreams and pay attention to dreams that might have to do with that relationship. So now I want to introduce my friend and my colleague, Dr. Chelsea Wakefield. So Chelsea is a teacher, a workshop leader, a prolific writer, a truly multifaceted, multidimensional trained psychotherapist. She's one of those therapists that keeps loving to learn and integrating many, many, many ways of doing healing and doing the therapeutic process. She's a really incredibly wonderful couples relationship therapist. And as some of you know, she's going to offer an 8-week dream group starting in September. She's written several wonderful books, and one of them, Negotiating the Inner Peace Treaty, has a lot to do with what we're talking about. And her book on relationships has a lot to do with especially what we're talking about today. So Chelsea, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, I'm so happy you're here.
Okay, so I just was so enjoying what you were saying and the reading that you were doing from Hal and Sidra. The wisdom there always just strikes me. It's just so amazing, their insights into relationship. I think I want to, first of all, you were mentioning that I'm multifacetedly trained, but everything that I have ever trained in sits on a foundation of my Jungian perspective around individuation, around complexes, around shadow. And I have really come to see relationships as the purpose of relationships is really about our growth. Relationships are not ultimately about need meeting, even though many people get into relationships thinking they're about need meeting, but they're really about inviting us into deeper awareness of ourselves. And sometimes I like to use the metaphor that if you walk into a lake that has been still for a long, long time, you will notice that there's silt on the floor of the lake, and it's very fine. And as you begin to walk through it, you begin to stir it up, and the water kind of gets murky. It was perfectly clear before you entered, but now it's murky. And oftentimes in a relationship, that is also what happens, is the silt on the floor of our psyches in these intimate relationships with others start to get stirred up. And some of that can be very confusing and very murky. So the dreams can help a lot to shed light on what is going on between us. The other thing that's important to understand about relationships is they really are a third entity. There's you and me, and then you can call it either the us or the we. Sometimes I say you, me, and we. And that third entity has its own life, its own being, and its own shadow. So it's really important to realize that if you're in a relationship, that relationship has a shadow, just like you have a shadow. And the relationship shadow may be different than the personal shadow, or it might be the interface of two people's shadows. Most of the trouble that people get into in relationships has to do with interlocking complexes, where my vulnerability starts to hook the vulnerability in my husband or a dear friend, and then they react out of that, and then I'm reacting to their reaction, and then we just go round and round until we get a little bit of consciousness about what has gotten stirred up from the lake bed floor, and then we can do some work and look at from an aware place, from that aware ego place, we can kind of start to wonder who in me is so upset, who in me is so needy or insecure or demanding, who in me is so joyful and loving. What's my vulnerable child doing in the midst of all of this? And our dreams can give us a lot of information around that. So I'm going to share a few dreams here that have been helpful to me over time. I'm going to start with a dream that I had maybe about 4 years ago. And we moved to Little Rock almost 7 years ago. And 4 years ago, in my husband's office, he had a number of boxes, maybe about 10 of them, that he had yet to unpack. And I was getting a little frustrated about these boxes sitting around, thinking, they should have been unpacked by now. It's about time, plenty of time has gone by. And one day, out of my frustration, I said to him, you know what? If something happens to you, I'm just taking all those boxes wholesale to the dump. So it was my way of trying to motivate him to get going on the boxes. So the next morning, my husband gets up, and similar to Susan's relationship, oftentimes Tom and I will share dreams, not every morning, but often. And so he tells me, I had a really interesting dream last night. And I said, oh, really? What happened? He said, well, there was some sort of a festival on the shore of a lake, and the festival was over, and the bulldozers were coming. They were coming to tear down all the buildings of the festival because the festival was over. And I was running around trying to find the mayor, saying, I've got to save the buildings because they can be repurposed for something. And I could not find the mayor. And I said, well, that's a really interesting dream. And I got in my car and I was driving to work, and all of a sudden I had a light bulb come on. And the light bulb said to me, oh, I see. That's how he felt when I told him that I was going to take all his boxes to the dump. That it was just kind of like the bulldozers coming and he had nothing to do about it. So it was really helpful for me to realize I'd been a little bit harsh on the demanding end of these inner selves that get going in me. And as a result of that, I had been resisting helping him unpack those boxes because I was thinking to myself, he's a big boy, he can do it on his own. I have plenty to do. But then I realized that as I was helping him, he began to tell me all these stories of his life because they were filled with old business stuff and memorabilia from his running days and trips to the 5 years he lived in Japan. And I actually started filming him as he was telling these stories and pulling thing after thing out of these boxes. So it turned into a wonderful sharing time together, something that I had been resisting because I simply was being dismissive and thinking, I have lots to do. He can do that on his own. But it really wasn't about the boxes. It was about the experience that we then subsequently shared together. So that was one dream that I had. I had another dream in my marriage. This was my dream, and it happened about 20 years ago. And we were going through a period in our marriage that was very unhappy. Tom had had a couple of losses, and he had moved into really a depression, a serious depression. And as a psychotherapist, he wouldn't go to therapy. He wouldn't take medication. He wouldn't do anything other than be depressed. And I was very disillusioned with the relationship. And especially because it had started out on such a romantic level. And Tom is a very romantic guy. And we'd had these sort of wonderful first 10 years. And now he was in this slump, and I was very disillusioned. So this is the dream that I had. I am going down into the basement of a castle. And in the basement of this castle, I open a cupboard, and in the cupboard is one of my old piano students, something that I did years ago. As a musician, I taught piano many years ago, and there was this adorable princess-like girl that was one of my students. She is in the cupboard, hanging on a hook, dead. So the princess is hanging on a hook. And then the evil starts to swirl around me in the basement of this castle, and I start to call out for the angels to protect me, or for Jesus to come, or something. I just am in need of protection from this terrible evil. And I awoke from that dream, and I was in a dream group at the time, and somebody said, do you know anything about the myth of Inanna? So this is the benefit of being in a dream group with other people who know a bit about mythology and symbol association. And I didn't really know much about the myth of Inanna in terms of how she was called into the underworld to help her sister who was having difficulty giving birth. And on her way down, at every level that she came down, she had to peel off some aspect of her identity. She had to take off her crown, her jewels, her cape, her elegant clothes. And when she reached the bottom, there was kind of a debacle between her and her sister, and she was killed and left to hang on a hook. And she had sent word or given word to her attendants up on the level of land that if she didn't return, they were to come down and rescue her. So they came down and rescued her and resuscitated her, brought her back up to the earth level, but she was a changed woman. She was far more grounded and more human. Before, she had been the queen of heaven. Now she was the queen of heaven and earth. And so as I was listening to that dream, I thought about how, in many ways, in my relationship to Tom, I had been the princess, and it was time for the princess to die. It was time for me to start growing up and not depending on him to generate all of the romance in the relationship, and for me to be sulking and unhappy about how he was not available to be the prince. And that was the beginning of a turning point in our relationship. And it had to do with a really big signal to me that it was time to grow up. Now, I've had wake-up calls about growing up a number of times. I think we're always growing up in some way, but that certainly was an important wake-up call in terms of stop looking to Tom, get your tapper deep, get a life, don't wait for him. And as I began to really become more of an adult, more of a woman in my own right, I started to get happier. And my interactions with him changed. I was evoking different things out of him. And eventually, one day, he had the following dream. So in this dream, he is in an airport and he walks through the door that would typically be going to the airplane. But instead, he descends down into an archaeological dig, this beautiful kind of Greek setting. And in the archaeological dig, he discovers that he is walking down the center of these pillars and he is holding hands with a beautiful woman. And he suddenly looks over at her and he realizes that the woman was me. And so I'm still very moved as I tell them. It was like such a significant turning point in our relationship where it's like he suddenly saw me again. And came out of that depression and we started to re-engage in a really beautiful way. So sometimes when I am talking to couples that have become very disconnected, I will tell them, you know what? You two should just start sharing your dreams with each other. Because what I know is that when you share your dreams with each other, there's a lot of material. The psyches start to speak to each other. And something about, in any intimate relationship, there's always an understream that's going on. There's an unconscious level of the couple. And so sharing dreams with someone that you care about, it doesn't have to be a husband, wife, friend, lover. It's just someone that also enjoys dreams. It's the process of sharing the dream will bring things into consciousness that were not there before. I'm going to share a couple more dreams here, and then maybe we'll have a couple minutes for some questions. So this particular dream was shared actually by Tom's mother, and it was a dream that actually helped prepare us for her exit from this earth. What happened was, her name was Della, and I loved her a lot, and she was dying in our home a long time ago. And we had a hospice team, and she was being well cared for. And there were some very sweet moments with her. One time I went down to check on her, and it was 3 a.m. And she said to me, "I want breakfast." And I said, "Well, Tom is sleeping." And she said, "Men can eat at any time." So I went upstairs and got Tom, and we all came down at about 3:30 in the morning and ate breakfast together. And during that time, she said, "I've been dreaming. The boat has come for me 2 times. The boat is coming again in 3 days, and I am getting on." So in 3 days, she passed. But that was just such a beautiful signaling. And I had the same experience with my own mother, who called me en route back to our home when we lived in North Carolina to let me know that the vehicle that she had been driving in had gone over the cliff, and she had gotten out of the vehicle before it had crashed below. And on the way home, she stopped at my cousin's house and she exited the vehicle. We had a really, really sweet conversation when she called me and told me that she was going to be exiting the vehicle. And I was just very moved and very touched that our last conversation would have been one in which she shared a dream with me, and also helped to prepare me for that kind of shocking event when my cousin called me. So there's lots of really tender, important dreams. Speaking of dreams and life after death, I had a lovely dream sometimes you'll have dreams that are almost like visitations. And I'm not sure that they're not visitations. Some sort of something on the other side is actually connecting with us. It has a quality of realness, of substantialness, that it really feels like a visitation. Susan and I had a dear friend, his name was Jeremy Taylor. And Jeremy has been the Johnny Appleseed of dream work. He's traveled all over the world and planted little dream groups all over the place, written numerous books. And he passed away suddenly a few years ago. And it was a big loss for the dream world. He was quite a character and very big in the dream world. And I had a dream about a month after he had passed. And in the dream, he was deconstructing his bedroom at a monastery that he had been living at. And it was this beautiful Tibetan bed, just carved, and it was all being packed up. And he was in a circle of young people on the grounds, which was not unlike what he was often doing when I was around him and he was teaching in groups. He was such a generous soul in terms of very approachable, and people would kind of gather around him and ask him lots of questions, and he would answer them, give away as much the gift of his knowledge. And he happened to see me. I was walking down to my car, and he left the little group and walked me down to the car. And as I was getting into the car, he looked deeply into my face and said, "Keep in touch." And it was so lovely. It was such a gift of a goodbye when he had kind of left the planet so suddenly. So those are all little bits and pieces of dreams that have to do with the afterlife, and dreams that prepare us for the passing of someone. Dreams that tell us ways that we need to grow up in relationships and change and evolve. And dreams that give us information about a dynamic that's going on in a relationship that really needs to be addressed. So I'll pause for anyone that wants to make a comment or ask a question.
So just take your time, take a deep breath. Feel free to ask a question, make a comment, share something. We're just glad you're here.
And while you're percolating on that, I want to also offer that you can do something called dreaming for the other, which means that if the two of you are both dreaming and sharing your dreams, you could ask your partner, particularly one that you sleep with, if you have someone of that sort, but not necessarily, tell them something you're trying to sort through and ask them if they could have a dream for you. I think that's another possibility of something that you can do with someone that you're close with, and that where you have an understream, some sort of a connection in the understream. So anyone have any comments or questions? Or any dreams that you've had that are relational?
Dan?
I'll jump in. Wonderful session from both Susan Smiths on the screen.
I guess I've got my name up there, Susan.
I have very physical dreams, and I don't always remember them, but my wife Jennifer is also on the screen, and she'll tell me that I reached out and pushed her, or I was very active and I actually struck her. And last night I was dreaming that something was moving away from me, and I reached out to grab it, and I nearly knocked over the lamp on the nightstand. And I don't remember exactly what was happening. But then this morning, Jennifer told me in the middle of the night, she heard me say, "If you would only listen to me." And I have no memory of saying that or a dream that related to it. But I wonder if there's something about physicality during dreams that's meaningful that I should pay attention to.
Chelsea, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a couple thoughts about that. I do think that some people are more physical in their dreams. There's actually a brain process that tends to immobilize us. I don't know if any of you have had that experience of trying to wake up from a dream and you can't move. That's the opposite of what you seem to be talking about, where you're actually, the body is actually acting out something that's going on in the psyche. It would be interesting to note what was going on in the day residue around those kinds of dreams, whether there was something that was really stirring you up on a certain level in the bracket around that. And my other thought is that I would really want to look at the inner world of that dream, because the phrase is, I wish you would just listen to me. So if that was my dream, I would really want to know, is there some dimension in me, some inner self, some part of me that I'm not listening to and that I need to attend to? And it's getting really violently expressive because it really wants me to listen. I think it's wonderful that your wife was able to catch what you spoke, because you never would have remembered that.
No.
But Susan, do you have any additional thoughts about that?
I had a visual image that we might need to buy you a dream bouncy house so you're safe when you bang around in the night. Or, one of those soft little kid playpens, or, we want you to keep being as wild and physical as you can possibly be and not get anything broken. No, I didn't have anything other than just that visual image of putting you someplace safe. So we have another hand, and thank you, Dan. Laurie.
Thank you. So through what you've talked about today, I found myself really taking in what you said about relationship as a way of growth and to stir up the unconscious or the shadow. I have been single for 20 years, and I'm curious about why I'm not choosing to grow in that way, or, what is really going on, what shadow I'm not, whatever it is that's causing me to not connect and be in a partnered, intimate, maybe sexual relationship with someone. And so I immediately wanted to work individually with either one of you. Like, can I come to therapy and let's take a look and see? And I don't know if either one of you are doing that. So that is a question with an individual like me.
Chelsea is doing that. So that's always something to discuss with her, and you can get her phone number out of the directory. And let's be very careful. We've worked so hard not to concretize rules. So, the Dalai Lama is single. So is he not spiritually evolved because he's not involved with somebody? I don't think so. So they're different paths. I'm sure he has things to learn, but I'm sure he's learned things by being single that I will not have learned by living in a family. So I think it's a wonderful question. I think doing some work with Chelsea or some other therapist, whoever it works out with, but I would be really gentle with myself, and I would be wondering what might be there for me if I were in a relationship. And I would also want to be really kind with myself about the opportunities you've also had as a single woman. Chelsea, do you want to add anything?
I would echo that. I don't think
You're
that everyone's
muted.
called to be in a relationship.
You're muted.
Oh.
No, she's not.
No,
I
I can hear you.
Hear her.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I would echo that not everyone is called to be in a relationship, but sometimes I would also wonder, since it's sort of stirred up something in you and from the lake bed of your psyche, if there's something that has not yet
So
been
I still
addressed.
can't hear you, Chelsea. Maybe something is wrong.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. For some reason, I can't hear you.
Okay. And I don't know why that is.
Sandy, can you unmute and tell us what's going on?
You may have to back out and come back in unless you can come over to your mute at the bottom left and come up. And make
So
sure
I
your
cannot hear
microphone is
Sandy
on.
either.
Hmm.
Laurie, would you speak again? Because I could hear you.
Yes, I'll speak. And I find myself wondering if you're both logged in somehow under the same thing because your names both say Susan Smith. If that has something to do with it.
Well, I think we could hear each other earlier, right, Susan?
Oh, well, yeah.
Okay. So Chelsea, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I cannot hear anybody. Sandy, if you can fix that, I would be very grateful. If not, Chelsea, why don't you finish up the session and let people continue to do Q&A and end us at 1, and I will stay on for 30 minutes if I can hear anybody.
Yeah, and Sandy, can you actually put in the chat for her to get out and come back in? So, because maybe she can't hear that.
Yes, that's what needs to happen, but I don't know which is which. So you're going to get the chat too. I have
You
two
know what?
Susans.
The other thing is I have to leave at 1. So maybe
Okay.
my getting off will, because Susan forwarded me her link. I don't know why we could hear each other a while ago and now.
Okay,
Anyway.
I'm going to send you both that she needs to get out. Okay.
Okay. Okay. So I was saying that we're not all called to be in relationship, but sometimes, I mean, we all have disowned stuff. All of us, things that we are defended against because there's vulnerability there. The dream of the princess hanging on the hook for me essentially was saying you have a very young perspective on what relationships are about. And this huge shift that I went through, which I encourage all of the couples that I work with to go through, is about relationship as a path of growth. And once people really get into that perspective, it changes everything about the level of reactivity, about the level of taking it personally, about so many things in the relationship that begin to untangle when people get curious instead of furious, as I like to say. So I also, let me see if I can share my screen. There is, okay, so.
I'll have to, you're on.
I can hear you now.
Okay, so did you disable screen?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
I wanted to show the group this because I think this is really important in terms of like how relationships work. Most people in a relationship relate at the level of ego identity. They're, the inner cast of characters, the set of primary selves that operate in me and in you, and they've matched up and decided they want to be together. And what's interesting then is below this little waterline is the personal unconscious. And I know that you've been talking in this program about consciousness, personal consciousness, personal unconsciousness, and collective unconscious. So in the personal unconscious, this is where that silt on the lake bed resides. It involves early history, our attachment patterns, unconscious needs that we don't even know that we have that get stirred up when we start to feel vulnerable and really want and need someone. All sorts of complexes and projections. Complexes can be things like fears of abandonment, fears of being cheated on or mistreated in some way because that's been our history. Feelings that I don't know how you can stay loving me. I'm kind of defective. There's something wrong with me. So I'm going to precipitate some sort of a breakup before you break up with me because I'm really not worth loving. So there's all sorts of complexes about attachment and worth and things like that, both positive and negative. And our undeveloped potential is there, not only in the personal unconscious, but in the collective unconscious. So when we start to really get in touch with that deep self, which I like to call the soul print, this is something that I talk about a lot in my book, Negotiating the Inner Peace Treaty. This is where we have a doorway to the deep resources within us. This is where you can do really hard things in a relationship, where you can transcend your vulnerability and your egoic needs, your egoic demands, and you can really begin to see this entire picture as a process that two people are going through together. And again, for those of you who aren't partnered, this can be with a really dear friend. It could even be with your dog. This process of the ego identity, the unconscious, the deep self, and the collective unconscious. So all of these layers are going on at the same time. And when people begin to really grasp that this deep layer is going on, they enter into what I like to call individuation and connection, which means that both people start to individuate and they're sharing that process of individuation with each other. And out of that comes inspiration and creativity and spiritual resources. And the entire feel of the relationship begins to change. So I just wanted to share that with you as for everyone as kind of a model that I think about relationships that are deep relationships about individuation and connection.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do we have any other hands up?
Let me see what's in the chat here. Lots of suggestions about how to be heard.
So I'm going to say, while Chelsea's looking in the chat, there's one thing in there that we're going to want to respond to. I want to share another dream and say that some dreams are really upsetting. They're violent, they're scary, they're terribly unpleasant. And one way to look at it, we haven't really talked about nightmares, and I don't know why, but sometimes a nightmare is when we're going against what's best for our own soul and our own journey. And then when we figure out what that is and we take better action, oftentimes that nightmare will stop. But sometimes we can also have a nightmare that is telling us about a relationship. So when I was a young professional, I was being mentored by a greatly loved public figure who was really nasty to his mentees. And I had 2 or 3, and right now I can't remember, I think it might have been 3, but definitely 2 former mentees of this person come to me and tell me how destructive that he had been to them, and that both of them were in therapy 10 years later trying to heal from the trauma of this man's criticism and other stuff. And I was so young and so naive and so overly confident that I just thought, there's no way that's going to happen to me. Like, that's not me, blah, blah. Well, it did. And I learned to manage it. But the price that I paid to manage how I actually physically felt and emotionally felt when I was in the room with this man, the things that he said and did and blah, 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 we don't need the details. So this is the dream that I had right before I was able to pass away from his tutelage. I had a dream that I was waiting for my time to meet with him in his office. And I had on a pair of very attractive black jeans and my other appropriate professional clothes. And from the outside, I looked fabulous. And I was wearing a very, very thin diaper that nobody could see but me. And I knew as soon as I woke up that the amount of fear that this particular man has generated, apparently for I don't know how many years, in people that he's supervising, that I was afraid I was going to have an upset stomach So I'm wearing a diaper to keep from letting it be shown. And I was in a professional situation where I just needed to keep my mouth shut and get through it, which I did. So that's a really upsetting, yucky dream just about that relationship. That was not about anything else. I worked on it as an inner dream. It was an inner dream about how I felt, but it told you exactly what it was life like for me in that relationship. And when I had heard it from so many other people, I just totally dismissed it, but I'm not that young and stupid anymore. So sometimes we have relationship dreams that are massively unpleasant and even scary, but there's still information that sometimes we don't think we can afford to let ourselves really register. How does it actually feel to be in a relationship with this person? And that's pretty darn important. If you're in a relationship with somebody toxic or destructive, and for some reason you're staying in it and not letting yourself off the hook, it's really important to know that. And dreams can give us information that we don't need to have, but that we need. So I'm going to point you to the chat. If you can stay on, a person has put a wonderful technique in there, which we're going to talk about a little bit in the next 30 minutes. For any of you that need to leave, please feel free. And thank you for being here. And I look forward to our last session next week. And we will have a chance to stay an extra 30 minutes next week. Chelsea, I cannot thank you enough, not only for being here, but for all the work you've done on yourself and all the work that you do learning.
Thank you very much. It's been a joy to be here. And I hope to see some of you in the in-person dream group.
Good.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.